Good morning all, it's mid to late November. Would you like a flower farm tour? Should we go for a little walk around? I've got to cut a wedding. You think wedding in November? How can you be cutting a wedding? Well, I've got lots of material coming up from my lovely college colleagues. So I've got loads coming up from them, but what I need is the garden for the wedding. And so I'm going to be cutting foliage, and there is a surprising amount of cut flower material in the garden, given that we're the 21st or something of November. And I'm going to cut every single stem because we've got a frost forecast tonight. You can feel it in your fingers, chilly. I'm very layered up. Oh yes, many layers. So before it freezes, although the wedding is on Saturday, today is Tuesday, I'm cutting the whole garden. At this time of year, I can cut happily on a Tuesday and it'll all last very nicely for the weekend. I'm going to bring it into my cool studio, not heated, and work with it through the week for this wedding on Saturday. So come with me for a little garden tour. We'll tour the flower farm. I'll show you what it looks like in November. And while I'm at it, I'm cutting some flowers. And if you're new to the channel, you're very welcome. Please do subscribe, press the bell icon, and we'll tell you when we've got more clips coming up. And if any of the tips and tricks are useful, you can always buy me a coffee, or better still, join my club. The links for coffee buying and club membership are in the blurbs to all my clips. I am a flower farmer and florist, a floral creator. And what I love to do with my YouTube channel is encourage you to get into your garden and have some fun with your flowers. So come on, you're very welcome. Let's go and see what I've got out there. So we don't have much in the field at the moment, but we have a lot up the side of the house. The flowering ivy has been enormously good for invertebrates and feeding the bees, and now it's slowly becoming berries, and I'm going to have some for my wedding, even though it's raining. Can you see the rain? I'm cutting lots of willow at the moment for wreaths, but I'm not going to leave it behind for the wedding either. The colour for the wedding is jewel colours, and so a little bright willow will go a long way. This is a great crop for us through the winter, the willow. It's incredibly good for the environment to grow it, but it gives us a lovely income in the winter months. While I'm out here, I'm just checking on the contents of the greenhouse. I don't just water in the winter. I lift a pot to see if it's a bit light, and if it is, I water from underneath. You can see that cutting has rooted nicely. I could pot it on. And there are lots of little things in here. The sweet peas, they're really almost ready for planting into their new home in the tunnel where they'll flower in the spring. But I've got a few things I've got to do first. I'm a great one for doing things in order. But lots of cuttings have taken really nicely that we took in the summer. If you scroll back through my channel, you'll find a cuttings taking clip, which is always fun to take cuttings. Free plants, I say, and you can tell when they're coming because you see roots. Can you see that root curling out of the bottom of the pot? There is a penstemon for next year. Right, on we go. This does need a bit of water, but it's going to freeze tonight. So I'm going to be very wary of watering when there's going to be a frost. I'll wait a few days until this cold snap that they forecast has passed. Then I'll water, and I'll water in the morning so that they've got time to kind of recover from the shock of the cold before the night. And this is where the sweet peas will go. Doesn't look much at the moment, but give me time. And in the corner here, this is a lovely old crop of white honesty lunaria, which I've had in here for years, and it self-seeds itself. So it's kind of a short-lived perennial, and it seeds itself. So it just comes back again and again and again, gives me a lovely crop in the spring. And the big tunnel is full of annuals and biennials for next year. Some of them are so far advanced, they're trying to flower now. which is annoying, but that's why you're not supposed to. I really suggest people don't try and sow flowers too early in the autumn, because they try and flower in the same season. Can you see the blue? This is Chinese forget-me-not, flowering now. But I won't waste them. I'll take these for this wedding, for this weekend. Miraculously still flowering. How beautiful is this little blue person? This is Salvia uglinosa. Those of you who know my channel well will know how much I love this plant. It's a bully in the garden, but it's such a good blue. If you're cutting it and you've got sort of slightly damaged petals, just pull them off. So I'm going to cut the best of this for this wedding, and then after this cold weather, this will die back. But we leave it for the winter because it's such good cover for small birds and insects, and we'll cut it back hard in the spring. The same with the Verbena bonariensis, which is the other side. You can see the seed heads. The Verbena bonariensis, we will leave that because sometimes in the deep midwinter I come out and I'll find a gang of goldfinches feasting on the seed heads. So we won't cut those down until the spring. Hogweed growing wild in the edges. I might cut some of this to put in the taller arrangements for this wedding. This is wild. In the summer, I would be very wary. I would tell you not to touch this, because although this is not the certifiable plant, it's not giant hogweed. The sap, your skin can be very phytosensitive to the sap in sunshine, and so it can cause terrible blistering. But I think it would be absolutely lovely in the tall buckets which I'm arranging for this wedding. So I'm going to cut some of this. So the edges of your cut flower patch, this is my flower farm, which has got lots of wild in it. Nearly always have bits of detail that you can help yourself to and make a difference. Keep your eyes peeled. You never know what you might find. There's a real November feel around here. It's a time of year when the garden seems to look dank and yet tidy at the same time. It's a relative term, obviously, when I say tidy. It's been really, really wet. And as a result, I have not been able to get into this patch, which is called the pitch by yard, and plant my tulips. I've had the tulip bulbs are in the studio in their boxes and have been there for a couple of weeks now, but we've had such wet weather and no cool at all that to plant bulbs I would make more mess than I would achieve, objective achieved, if you see what I mean. But I'm hoping that this cold weather now that's coming tonight and staying for a little while will mean that once I've achieved another interim objective, which is to finish the 270 wreaths I've got to deliver to Petersham and cut a big kind of Christmas foliage order and got that out, that's done, then I will plant my tulips and hopefully the ground will have dried up a bit and I'll be able to get on with that. This is the patch where the tulips will eventually go once I've got some dry weather and the ground isn't so wet. But meanwhile, there's still surprising amounts to cut here. So let's have a look. This is my annuals patch, or the patch where anything that only goes into the ground for one season is grown here. So a lot of the green that you can see is biennials. So foxgloves, wallflowers, sweet rocket, which are great late spring, early summer crops for us. Do very, very well on our thick clay. but there are also leftovers, which I'm going to cut now. I'll show you. So this Chinese forget-me-not is self-sown from this summer's crop. And I'm going to cut it all. It's going to be lovely for this wedding. There's a little bit of feverfew. I've got to be careful that it's not rusty or munched. I can take all the rusted leaves off. It's nice as a little extra. There's not that much to cut, so it may not be much use for a scheme. These double butterfly snaps have been absolutely fantastic, and I will definitely have some of those. Possibly not for the wedding, they're a bit pale pink, but I have another project that they can go for. And we don't just grow flowers, we grow lunch too. So here are next year's broad beans. I might protect them from this frost because the temperature drop is going to be quite severe. And the noise is coming from the builders who are working on my new studio, which is coming on a treat. Yeah, the thing about a frost is if the temperature drop is very sharp, it doesn't have to be a very bad frost to cause really severe damage. And we've had, again, a long, warm, slow autumn with really quite high temperatures for the season. So at night we've been in the we've rarely got below 5. So we've been sort of 6 to 10, 11 degrees at night, Celsius. And during the day, we've been up to 16 degrees. So for a drop to -4 is going to be a shock, even though it's not that cold and it's kind of normal for the time of year. It's the extreme drop that causes trouble. So if you have any tender people, or you've got even quite hardy plants outside where they've been sitting, growing on quite nicely, I would consider protecting them if the drop in temperature is going to be very sharp, because they won't like it. You know, even doesn't matter how hardy they are, on principle, something is only really hardy if it's had time to harden off. And if you go from 10 degrees one day to -4 the next, that's a hell of a difference. So, and last winter, I remember a lot of people lost all their dahlias because they'd only just lifted them. They were warm and wet, and then we had -6, and the dahlias just froze and rotted. But equally, I lost some really quite hardy plants last winter, things that had survived year after year after year in normal winters, but it was that extreme dip of temperature that really knocked them out. So do consider doing a little protecting, guys. Another self-sown crop from a crop that I had earlier in the spring. So this was a crop of Cerinthe major purpurescens, lovely honeywort, which I had in this patch in the spring. I didn't harvest all of it, so it's self-sowed. And now I've got it again in November. And I'm going to take all of this. I've got a wedding, a dinner party, another dinner party, and my regular order for #1 Bruton. So this is all going to get used up. And as I walk along, I'm keeping an eye out for still good foliage. And when I say good, I'm looking for colour and form, not necessarily fresh green. So you can see here, I've got some nice hornbeam, lovely golden coloured hornbeam. And then behind it, still quite green, hardly turned yet, is liquid amber, which is just beginning to yellow up. And eventually it will go very, very red. But I like the yellow. And look, also green. Hazel still holding its leaves really nicely. So that lovely green hazel there, that's going to get harvested. And the hazel behind, which is golden there, that'll be harvested. So I'm not going to waste anything. Because this frost will come along, turn what's left of the leaves. A lot will fall off because frost is drying. Yes, there's quite a lot of hazel in this woodland, and it's a really fresh colour with a little bit of gold in it. I think we'll have plenty of that. and the gold of the lower branches of the hornbeam. So you can see if I run the camera up, the hornbeam, the leaves have all fallen from the top of the trees where it's windier, but down at the bottom, head height, still plenty to harvest. I have to be careful though harvesting this hornbeam, because you can see there are my hellebores, which I put into this patch of woodland last winter, and I don't want to trample them. By cutting the hornbeam a bit, I will let more light through for them to flower in late winter and early spring. And so the seasons turn. When we came here in 2004, none of these trees were here. We planted them, and we didn't have very much budget, so everything went in as very short, tiny short whips. So all of these trees, really, the tallest any of them were was a 30-inch whip, which at the time were quite an inexpensive way of doing things. Basically, we bought the hornbeam as hedging, and then we planted them as trees, and they've come up. It's worked, and we now have this sort of narrow, well, it's about, I don't know, 30, 40 foot of wide strip of woodland that goes around most of the edge of the flower farm, which provides a windbreak, but also an enormous amount of cover for wildlife. And that's the point of what we do is, yes, we need to grow flowers to make a living, but we feel as though the deal is that we also make an environment where wildlife can flourish, and because then there's a functioning food chain with us in it, as well as all the wildlife. And this patch is mostly shrubs and perennials. Not much in flower up here, but plenty of seed heads and some nice highlights of foliage. I'm looking for highlights to make the difference. There are still roses, but they really aren't good enough for cutting. They are very beautiful. This is Vanessa Bell, but I'm afraid if I brought them into the house, look, the rain has really not done them any favours. And I'm afraid of, if I brought them in and tried to keep them for more than a day, there might be, they might come down with botrytis. So there'll be little brown spots on all the petals. And I wouldn't want the botrytis spreading to the other material, which I've ordered up from my colleagues in Cornwall. So I'm not cutting these roses. Tempting though they may be, I could cut them and have them. Here's Desdemona, and Desdemona could go in a bud vase next to my desk, and I wouldn't mind what happened to her, but I'm not sure I'd trust her in a wedding situation. She might not hold up as well as one might hope. And there's the new studio from the other side. It's coming on really nearly. When I say really nearly, well, nearly really. Anyway, we'll get there eventually. So once this wedding is finished, we're now the 21st or something of November. I've got to do this wedding, and then I've got this big order of Christmas foliage to go and finish the wreathing. And then I've got 4 tons of peat-free mulch from Dalefoot compost in Cumbria, and all of the beds will be mulched to a depth of 2 inches. This whole patch, the whole of the farm, will be mulched, and that's a good job to do over December. And of course I've got to plant those tulips. Actually, thinking about it, I might bring the tulips up here. I know I'm not supposed to change my mind, but I might. So thank you very much for coming with me on my little tour. I'll tell you why my grass is quite long. It's because we're so wet in the winter that if we keep the grass long, walking on it makes a kind of mat, and then we cause less damage. It's less, it's easier to maintain in the spring. We just mow it, but we let it get quite long. If I were walking up and down here with barrows and squelching along, then we'd end up with a quagmire, whereas having the grass a bit longer gives us this sort of protective layer. So that's why we do that. And there is the flower farm in November. You'll have noticed no ranunculus yet. No, because I do them after Christmas. And you will have noticed some gaps. They are all to be filled. I have a trip planned up to see lovely Rosemary Hardy of Hardy's plants. Ooh, that'll be fun. I'll take you along on that. We'll go on a little shopping spree up to Hardy's, and I'm going to measure up how much space I've got. I've got a little shopping list that I've been making. I've been reading everybody else's books. I'm making lists. Oh yes, I like that. Have one of those. I might have one of those. We'll try one of those. So there is shopping and things to come up, but now I've got to cut the rest of this wedding. I hope you've enjoyed the tour, and the next clip up I'll be making winter wedding flowers with all British grown flowers. So I hope you enjoy that, and I hope you've enjoyed this little trip today. I hope you've immediately subscribed, press the bell icon and all that malarkey, and I'll see you all very soon. Anyway, bye-bye, happy November, happy Thanksgiving for those of you who celebrate the day after tomorrow. Happy Thanksgiving. Bye. Well, that's a nice start. About 150 stems. Good detail. And if you're wondering, this is Nicandra physaloides, or shoe fly plant, which I really grow for the seed heads. They're very dramatic. But I'm spotting some lovely, rather zingy green in the foliage. And this is just going to be detail for the wedding. And the pale pink is not going in the wedding. The pale pink is for number 1 Bruton. But the blue, look at that, true blue, sky blue. Amazing for November. There'll be much more about this in my next clip, when I make a clip about the wedding flowers. But here is a little harvest from a Somerset flower farm, 20th of November 2023, and these are the extra details which will go into an all British flowers wedding, and the main focal flowers are coming up from Cornwall, but the foliage and the details have been grown by me.